There are moments in sports that defy explanation. They defy physics. For one electric season, a 22-year-old kid from the south side of Chicago did just that. Night after night. He would take flight, contorting his body in midair, somehow hanging for an extra split second before kissing the ball off the glass over two defenders. He was a blur of speed and power, a 6.3-point guard with the explosive force of a 250-pound running back. In 2011, he led his hometown Chicago Bulls to 62 wins and was crowned the youngest, most valuable player in the history of the National Basketball Association. He wasn't just a star, he was an inevitability. He was the prince who would be king, the man destined to succeed Michael Jordan and bring a new dynasty to the city that had raised him. And then, in the blink of an eye, he was gone. This is the story of Derrick Rose, a legend defined not by the heights he reached, but by the agonizing silence of his fall. It is a tragedy in the classical sense, the tale of a hero whose greatest strength, his own violent, unsustainable, breathtaking athleticism, would become his fatal flaw. It is a story of impossible expectations, biological betrayal, and the haunting, unanswerable question that echoes through Chicago to this day. What if? To understand the legend of Derrick Rose, you must first understand Chicago. This is not just any city. It is a basketball mecca, a concrete jungle that forges some of the world's toughest and most spectacular players. But for nearly a decade after 1998, it was a city wandering in the wilderness. The ghost of Michael Jordan haunted the United Center, a six-championship shadow so vast that every new draft pick, from Eddie Curry to Tyrese Thomas, was instantly crushed by the comparison. Chicago wasn't just waiting for another star, it was waiting for a messiah. It needed someone to save it, not just from mediocrity, but from its own past. And then he appeared, not as an outsider, but as one of their own. Derrick Rose was born and raised in Englewood, one of Chicago's most dangerous neighborhoods. He was the protected one, the youngest of four brothers who shielded him from the streets, insulating his talent and dedicating their lives to ensuring he would make it out. He wasn't just in Chicago, he was of Chicago. He was the rose that grew from concrete, and the city saw its own grit, its own pain, and its own defiant hope in him. He became a local legend before he could legally drive. At Simeon Career Academy, he was a phenomenon, leading the Wolverines to back-to-back state championships, a feat never before accomplished in Illinois. He was the consensus #1 recruit in the nation, a hometown hero who already felt like a foregone conclusion. His one-and-done year at Memphis under coach John Calipari was a formality, a 38-win season that ended in the NCAA championship game, a campaign later vacated by the NCAA, but the controversy never stuck to Rose. It didn't matter. His destiny was already written. In 2008, the Chicago Bulls, a team that had finished the season with a miserable 33-49 record, entered the NBA draft lottery with a 1.7% chance of landing the #1 overall pick. It was a statistical impossibility, a prayer whispered into the void. And then the card was turned over. The Bulls had won. It wasn't a draft pick. It was a miracle. The prodigal son was coming home. The city that had watched him grow from a distance would now welcome him as its savior. The script was perfect, a fairy tale too good to be true. And for 3 years, it was. Derrick Rose's impact was not gradual. It was immediate. He walked onto the court as a 20-year-old rookie and played with the poise of a 10-year veteran. He averaged 16.8 points and 6.3 assists, capturing the Rookie of the Year award. But it was his playoff debut that etched the first chapter of his legend. In his very first postseason game on the road against the defending champion Boston Celtics, Rose exploded for 36 points, 11 assists and 4 rebounds, tying Kareem Abdul-Jabbar's 39-year-old record for most points by a rookie in a playoff debut. The Bulls lost the series in a grueling 7-game classic, but they had won the future. They had their guy. The next season, he became an all-star. His game evolved, the speed remained, but now it was paired with a vicious crossover and a growing confidence. He was no longer just a rookie, he was a problem. But it was the 2010-2011 season, his third year, that saw the legend detonate. The Bulls had hired Tom Thibodeau as head coach, a defensive mastermind who demanded everything from his players. They had signed Carlos Boozer and assembled a tough, defensive-minded roster around their young star. And Rose, at just 22 years old, made the leap from star to supernova. It is difficult to describe what it was like to watch 2011 Derrick Rose. He was a force of nature. He played with a controlled rage, a relentless, attacking style that the league had never seen from the point guard position. He didn't just go around defenders, he went through them. His 1-foot, high-knee, wrong-hand hanging layups became his signature, a display of impossible body control where he would absorb contact from 7-footers, hang in the air, and still finish. He was unguardable. The league, then firmly in the grasp of LeBron James's new Big Three in Miami, suddenly had a new challenger. Rose led the Bulls to a 62-20 record, the best in the NBA. He averaged 25 points, 7.7 assists, and 4.1 rebounds. He did it without another true superstar by his side. Joakim Noah and Carlos Boozer were fine players, but Rose was the engine, the transmission, and the wheels. He was the entire offense. On May 3, 2011, the NBA announced the inevitable. Derrick Rose was the league's most valuable player. At 22 years and 191 days old, he was and remains the youngest player ever to win the award. He had broken the sound barrier. He was on top of the basketball universe. The kid from Englewood had delivered on every ounce of promise, and in Chicago, a new dynasty felt, once again, like a matter of when, not if. The 2011-2012 season began under the cloud of an NBA lockout, leading to a compressed 66-game schedule. For a player like Rose, whose entire game was built on relentless physical exertion, this was a dangerous proposition. The wear and tear began to show. He was in and out of the lineup with a series of nagging injuries, turf toe, back spasms, groin strains. He would miss 27 games that season. The media, for the first time, began to whisper. Was he durable enough? Was his all-out style sustainable? The Bulls, however, were still a juggernaut, clinching the #1 seed in the East for the second straight year. Rose was back, he looked healthy, and the Bulls were favorites to come out of the East. April 28, 2012. It is a date seared into the memory of every Chicago Bulls fan. It is the moment the music stopped. It was Game 1 of the first round of the playoffs against the 8th seed Philadelphia 76ers. The Bulls were in complete control. With 1:22 left in the fourth quarter, they were up by 12 points. The game was over. Derrick Rose was still on the floor. Coach Tom Thibodeau, notorious for playing his starters heavy, punishing minutes, saw no reason to pull his star. It was a decision that would be debated with agonizing futility for years to come. Rose brought the ball up the court, made a skip pass, and then cut baseline. He received the ball back, and in a move he had made 10,000 times, he elevated for a jump stop in the paint. He didn't collide with anyone. He wasn't fouled. He just landed. The landing was wrong. The United Center, which had been roaring seconds before, fell into a stunned, confused silence. Rose crumpled to the floor, immediately clutching his left knee. He wasn't screaming in agony. It was worse. It was a grimace, a look of shocked realization. He had felt the pop. He tried to get up, but the leg wouldn't respond. As the medical staff surrounded him, a city of 2.7 million people held its collective breath. He was helped off the floor, his arms draped over two trainers, unable to put any weight on the leg that had just made him an MVP. The game ended. The Bulls won, 103-91. But the victory felt like a funeral. The city waited. And then, the news came down like a guillotine. A torn anterior cruciate ligament, ACL. The three letters that are a death sentence for explosive athletes. The season was over. The championship run was over. But in that moment, no one knew the truth. A truth that was far darker. The Derrick Rose they had just watched limp off the court, the youngest MVP, the human highlight reel, was gone. And he was never, ever coming back. The fall was not a single event, it was a cascade. Rose missed the entire 2012-2013 season. His rehabilitation became a torturous public spectacle. The return marketing campaign from his sponsors built the anticipation to an unbearable level. He was practicing. He was dunking in warm-ups. But he wasn't playing. The Bulls, led by a superhuman Joakim Noah, scratched and clawed their way through the playoffs, and a narrative began to form. They were doing it without him. The city, which had once worshipped him, grew impatient. The whispers turned to accusations. Is he soft? Is he scared? Does he even want to play? The pressure that had forged him now threatened to consume him. When he finally did return for the 2013-2014 season, he was a ghost. The explosion was gone, replaced by a visible, painful hesitation. He was thinking, not reacting. The game that had been pure instinct was now a cold, mechanical process. And then, just 10 games into his return, it happened again. A right meniscus tear. Another surgery. Another season lost. The cycle repeated the next year. In February 2015, another meniscus tear in the same right knee. The betrayal was complete. His body, the vessel of his greatness, had become his prison. Why? Why did this happen? The why is the tragic core of his story. The first, most obvious answer is his style of play. Derrick Rose played basketball with a violence that the point guard position had never seen. He didn't just change direction, he detonated his joints, absorbing and redirecting impossible amounts of force. His landing mechanics, particularly on his signature jump stop, were brutal, often landing stiff-legged. He played a running back's game on a hardwood floor, and the human body simply cannot withstand that kind of punishment. His MVP season wasn't just his peak, it was an outlier, a year where his body held up for one glorious, impossible run. The injury wasn't a question of if, but when. But the when is where the analysis becomes darker. Why was he in that game? Up 12, 90 seconds to go, against an 8th seed. The decision by Tom Thibodeau to leave his franchise player on the floor has been relitigated into oblivion. Thibs was a coach who believed in one gear, all out. His philosophy had made the Bulls tough, had made Rose an MVP. But that same relentless philosophy may have provided the context, the unnecessary 90 seconds, for the ticking time bomb to finally go off. It was a perfect storm of a physically unsustainable player and a philosophically uncompromising coach. In 2016, the Chicago Bulls traded Derrick Rose to the New York Knicks. The fairy tale was over. The native son, the savior, was exiled. The fall was complete. He became a journeyman, bouncing from New York to Cleveland, playing with the rival LeBron he was once destined to dethrone. The MVP was now a bench player, a role player, a man fighting just to stay in the league. For years, Derrick Rose was a basketball nomad, a painful reminder of what could have been. And then, on Halloween night in 2018, something remarkable happened. Now playing for the Minnesota Timberwolves under that same coach, Tom Thibodeau, Rose was given the start. What followed was not a basketball game, it was an exorcism. He scored 50 points, a new career high. He hit floaters, he attacked the rim, and in the final seconds, he made a game-saving block. The game clock expired, and the arena erupted. Rose, overwhelmed, buried his face in a towel, weeping. Those were not the tears of a man who had returned. They were the tears of a man who had finally accepted what he had lost. That 50-point game was not a comeback. It was a defiant, glorious coda. It was the ghost of the MVP roaring back for one last night, to remind the world of what he was, and to make peace with what he had become. So what is the legacy of Derrick Rose? He is, perhaps, the most tragic what-if in modern sports. More than Grant Hill, more than Penny Hardaway. Why? Because they were legends of potential. Derrick Rose was a legend of fact. He didn't just promise to be great, he was. He reached the summit. He won the MVP. He stood at the absolute pinnacle of his sport and had it all ripped away, not by a rival, but by his own biology. He is not a failure. He is a cautionary tale about the razor-thin line between immortality and mortality. He changed the game, paving the way for the next generation of hyper-explosive guards like Russell Westbrook and Ja Morant. He gave a city, broken-hearted since the retirement of its god, a reason to believe again. The tragedy of Derrick Rose isn't that he fell. The tragedy is that he showed us, for one brilliant, blinding season, what it looked like to fly.